Howdy, we're live. This is Erin Boster, and thank you for learning about MS with me. It's MS Awareness Month, and I'm committed to jumping online to do live streams throughout the month, answering your questions and talking about multiple sclerosis. So let's jump in, guys. Just got my kids upstairs to bed. Neither of them are actually asleep. They're just in their rooms reading. And my wife said that we could jump online, and so let's do it to it. As you jump online, please, as you recall, do me a favor, tell me where you're calling in from. I love watching this growing online community. It's super fun to see where people are joining us from. Also, as you jump online, please remember any questions that you might ask need to be generalizable. I can't diagnose you or treat you on the interwebs, and so please avoid personalized questions about, hey, this specific thing happened to me. Brad's online. How are you, Jen? Great to see you. Hello, Debbie Bell. Vicky's online. Hello, hello. I've got Scotty Rosenkrantz. What's up, Scotty? Mary Lou is here. Divine Misery is here. Dan McGee. This is fantastic. I love you guys. There's 45 of you, and it's growing and growing. I've already got the first question from Delaney. Hello, Delaney. How are you doing? She writes, how do you live a normal, in parentheses, how do you live a normal life while avoiding your stress triggers? Traveling causes me panic attacks. Do I just never travel again? Delaney, that's a great question. And let's unpack it a little bit. So how do you live a normal life? I really don't know what a normal life means. I think we live the life in front of us. And I think that normal is really sort of a social construct. So what's normal for you might not be normal for me. And what was normal for you 5 years ago might not be normal now. Now, she talks about how do you avoid stress triggers? I hate it when doctors tell people to just avoid stress. Well, just avoid the stress. I mean, let's face it. Nobody goes home at night and says, honey, let's get stressed out. I mean, that just doesn't happen. And I don't really think it's feasible to completely avoid stress. Now, Delaney's not asking about avoiding stress. She's talking about avoiding stress triggers. I think that your question is kind of wise. I think it is paramount that we identify what those triggers are. And so you give an example of saying that traveling causes panic attacks. If you know that traveling causes panic attacks, then I think that you're on the road to figuring out what to do about it. One option is to never travel again. And that sounds kind of horrible to me. I love traveling. I love going new places. I love meeting new people. And Delaney, you might also. If traveling causes panic attacks, there's work that can be done to acclimate yourself to traveling. I have a close childhood friend who in his 40s developed a fear of flying. He actually had to get off of an airplane with his family still on the airplane, headed out for a vacation. And I can only imagine how that felt. You know, he's really brave, and he sought out a therapist who is working on overcoming his particular phobia. Now, I'm not saying the only answer, Delaney, is to find a therapist, but I think that doing some targeted things to help you overcome your fear and panic attacks of traveling is valuable. For example, might you on a beautiful Saturday take a 1-hour trip, go somewhere for a lunch and then come back? And log in a success. Maybe the following weekend you go for a 2-hour trip and come back. My point here is there's no rush and you can ease into it. I think that normal is a culturally defined term, and I think that it's constantly and ever changing. Delaney, I think it's fair to grieve loss and to grieve your old normal, but then I think you have to turn and embrace the new normal. I personally hope that you will tackle your fear of traveling. I hope that you will tackle this trigger and work towards, again, enjoying traveling. It might be really awesome to read some books on traveling. It might be really awesome to plan a trip, even if you don't go with a loved one, just to game out what it would be like to go to Wales or to go to Scotland. Just food for thought. Thank you for asking. And of course, thanks for jumping online. There's 65 people that have jumped on with us tonight. I've got all kinds of people from all over the place. This is really neat. So Todd Jones writes, can Botox walk better, more functional? So what I think Todd means is, can receiving botulinum toxin help you walk better? And the answer is yes. Spasticity management is dealing with tight, stiff muscles, limbs that are hard to bend, spasms and cramps. And if you have focal spasticity, like just the hand, then you can Botox and open that up. And the goal of spasticity management is to make you more functional. So if you have spasticity around the knee joint, if you have spasticity in the calf or the foot, botulinum toxin can free up those muscles. They can loosen them, which then allows you to work on making them stronger. It allows you to be more effective at physical therapy with an ultimate goal of walking better. So yes, that's true. Let's see here. Robert Dunkel writes in. He says, I feel awful. I have a few lesions and none are enhancing. I'm tired all the time. I have bad brain fog. So Robert, you bring up an interesting thing called the clinical radiographic paradox. The clinical radiographic paradox is a reflection of the fact that sometimes the human being's clinical picture is not aligned with their MRI. You can have someone who is very, very debilitated with only a few spots on their brain MRI. You can also have a situation where someone is doing really, really well with very little disability and their MRI looks super scary. And in both cases, this is called a clinical radiographic paradox. Now, instead of focusing on what is the clinical radiographic paradox, I think I would rather try to address the reality of what I'm reading. You're sharing that despite having a few spots that you have bad brain fatigue. And that's not out of order. We see this all the time because the MRI of the brain is taking a picture of structure. It's not taking a picture of function. If I take a picture of the outside of your house, I don't know if someone inside your house is using the bathroom. I don't even know if there's a fire in the kitchen. I don't know if there are people arguing or if anyone's sleeping in the bedrooms. All I know is that the outside of the house has a certain shape and color. In a similar fashion, when we take a picture of the brain, an MRI, we're really just taking two-dimensional images of a three-dimensional structure. And it doesn't tell us about how that structure works. We know from special type of imaging called functional imaging or functional MRI that when someone with MS is doing a task, whether that be a motor task like walking or moving their thumb, or even a cognitive task like preparing to walk or reading something, because of various areas of brain damage, they use a lot more of their brain to get the job done. So I'll use an example of moving your finger. When someone without MS is moving their finger, only a certain small section of the other half of their brain lights up on a functional MRI. When someone with MS moves their finger, sometimes both hemispheres light up like Christmas tree lights. And what's happening is they're literally using a lot more territory, a lot more brain to get the job done. It's my belief that this is the underpinnings of fatigue, including cognitive fatigue, including brain fog. That was a great question. Thank you for asking it. Guys, it is MS Awareness Month, all month. My team this morning took an awesome picture. Not every team member made it early before clinic started, but a good portion of them showed up. And I've posted that in the community section of my channel. So if you want to see a few of my awesome team members, please go check that out. There's 93 people online right now. That is absolutely awesome. I love that I get a chance to interact with all of you. Let's see what else is cooking here. So I've got Starshine that writes, sometimes my limbs feel numb, but still have feeling. Is there a degree of numbness? Sometimes I feel weak, but not really weak. Is that just a sensation? Well, Starshine, forgive me. Starshine, you bring up a really great point. The human being experiences something. So you experience a tingling or you experience a numbness, as it were. And it's a subjective experience. It's also sometimes hard to describe to other people. Now, as a neurologist doing a neurological examination, we try to quantify that the best that we can. Why do we do that? Well, in part, I think it's our nature. And in part, we do it because we understand that it's not all or none. And the better job that we as neurologists can do to define it, it allows us to have better insights into what's going on. And for example, if it's getting better. So for example, and I don't have any of my neuro tools here, many of you have heard of a tuning fork. So a tuning fork, you smack it and it's vibrating, and then you put it on someone's toe or their finger and it buzzes. and you ask if they can feel the buzzing. And if they have a certain type of numbness, the person with the numbness will stop feeling the buzzing before the examiner. Now, the kind of tuning fork that I like to use is graded. It literally has numbers on it. And so it allows me to quantitate the degree of numbness. So I place the graded tuning fork on your finger, and I'm watching the numbers, and your eyes are closed, and you tell me when you can't feel it anymore. And I can see at what number you stop feeling it. And that's an attempt at trying to quantify the degree of numbness. Another example of quantification, when you talk about being weak, when we examine you and we see how strong the muscle is, we try to grade it. There's a scale of 0 through 5. 5 is fully strong. 0 is you can't even contract the muscle belly. 1 is you can contract the muscle belly, but it doesn't move. 2 is it moves, but only when you don't have gravity involved. 3 is when you can beat gravity. 4 is when you can provide some resistance, but not full resistance. And again, 5 is full strength. Now, all of this is intended to allow the neurologist to better describe what we're seeing, what the subjective experience the human has, and what objectively we can see. And to give you an example, let's pretend that you suffer an attack where your leg is numb and it's weak. Well, how numb and how weak? Well, I can use a tuning fork on your leg to get a degree of numbness. And I can do my exam where I grade your strength 0 through 5 to see how strong it is. Then we give you steroids. And when you come back to me 4 to 6 weeks later in clinic, I'm going to ask you if you've noticed if it's less numb and if it's less weak. And then I'm also going to examine you, and I'm going to, again, use a tuning fork, and I'm also going to examine your strength. And so here we're collecting as much information as possible. We're collecting subjective, important information from you, the human, and we're collecting objective information from the exam. And it's our hope that this allows us to best grade what's going on. The bottom line is it's not straightforward. And I really feel that it takes listening and understanding, and it takes examining, and it's the composite that we put together to understand the picture. Thank you for asking the question. There's 106 people online. This is awesome. If you guys are digging this, please give it a thumbs up. Let's see what else we have cooking here. Elizabeth M. writes in, I have an appointment in August 2019. I've had body tremors, confusion, pain, bladder, cog fog. Wow. So that's a lot of stuff. What else do I have here? So Starshine says, thank you. I'm just trying to figure out an intelligent way to explain it to the neurologist. I wasn't sure if there's wording for that feeling. My opinion, Starshine, is that you want to describe it to the best of your ability. I like to discuss where it is. So you say it's the numbness is here, or the tingling is here, like which part of your leg. I like to talk about the intensity. 0 is it's not numb or tingly, and 10 is the most that you can think of. I like to talk about what things make it worse. So for example, if you walk for a long distance, does that make it worse? When you get overheated, does that make it worse? If you lay down or bend your leg, does that make it worse? I like to describe what makes it better. Does taking a cold shower make it better? Does massaging it make it better? Does nothing make it better? I like to know if there's a trigger, like if I bump my leg, then it suddenly gets bad, or if I'm way overheated, then it gets really bad. I like to know if there's anything associated with it. So I have numbness in my leg, and if it goes on long enough, I start to get numbness in my hand, or my vision gets blurry, or when I get numbness, I also lose my bladder. I like to know if it's ever happened again. So, hey, I had this 10 years ago, and now it's back. All of these descriptors help me, the neurologist, best understand your numbness. I also think it's helpful if you have words to describe it, the character. Like it's an electrical feeling, or it's an achy feeling, or it's a cold sensation, or it feels like when your hand falls asleep. These are all terribly helpful as we try to work with you to figure out what's going on. I've got Russell Hall saying, what's up from Orlando? Well, hello. I hope that you're enjoying Orlando. What else is here? I've got Katrina Bond, and she shares Starshine. Yeah, me too. The best way I've come up with is that I'm actually confusing myself in my brain and eyes. All right, let's keep looking here. So CozyDozyDude, that's a good name, CozyDozyDude, writes, if I don't lose the spot, what's your opinion about marijuana for MS pain and spasms? I don't think that I've done a live stream this month where someone doesn't ask me about that. CozyDozyDude, I am working on uploading a video, a recent lecture that I just gave talking about cannabis and MS. Tonight, I'm not inclined to go over that again. Several of my last live streams have talked about that. There is a lot to talk about. I guess very, very briefly, the scientific data supporting using cannabis to treat spasticity and pain in MS isn't very awesome. It's not very solid or good quality data. That doesn't mean that it doesn't work. It just means that there isn't a lot of data to support its use. But let's move on and do different questions tonight. You certainly can look at the replays of my old live streams, and very soon I hope to get this video uploaded. So I've got Jennifer who writes in, am I crazy to think visiting a chiro helped relieve my MS hug? I went twice a week after getting steroid infusion. First flare-up and diagnosis, hug-free for a week. Jennifer, there's not enough information to really know the answer. If you had an MS hug, we presume that that's because of a spinal cord lesion. And steroids can treat that. And steroids don't work right away. So if you got the MS hug and a doctor gave you steroids, and then a couple weeks later it got better, it could have been because of the steroids. Now, between the steroids and when you got better, you had some things done. A chiropractic manipulation, for example. Now, my understanding is that a chiropractic manipulation, so cracking your back or adjusting the bones, can't fix an MS lesion in your spinal cord. I think steroids could, but who's to say? And I really don't have enough information to flush that out. So Julie writes in, do you have experience with MS patients with spinal stenosis? Can you tell if someone's affecting someone's gait? So spinal stenosis is a word that means that the spinal cord is being kind of pushed on, or it's tight. You see, the spinal cord leaves your brain and goes down, and it sits in bones. And you have your bone, and then you have a disc, the squishy disc, and then a bone, then a squishy disc. And sometimes the disc can push, and you can have a herniated disc. Sometimes you can have bones that actually encroach on the spinal cord. And when that happens, it's tight inside the spinal canal. Now, spinal compression from spinal stenosis can cause problems with arms and legs and bowel and bladder, just like an MS lesion can cause problems with arms and legs and bowel and bladder. One of the very best ways to sort it out, one of the very, very best ways, is to obtain an MRI, because the MRI will show you if there's a disc that's pushing on your neck, or if that your spinal cord is tight for some other reason, or it'll show you that it's from an MS lesion. And so one of the very best things we can do is to grab a quick MRI of the cervical spine to answer the question. And yes, I have a lot of experience with folks that have MS and have cervical stenosis. I partner with amazing neurosurgeons that can go in and pluck out that disc and make things a bit better. I'm gonna pause really quick from reading the questions, and I want to share just a few thoughts. This week, I put out 2 videos. I put out a video on diet. I've been trying to do a series of videos on MS nutrition, and I shared what I hope is really a transformative tip. It's one change that really has a large impact. If you guys haven't checked that out, please take a look at my channel. It's a video I published just a few days ago, 2 days ago. And it's a pro tip on really changing the way you think about food and eat. Not to ruin the surprise, but my recommendation is to avoid processed foods, to avoid fast food, and to avoid excess sugar, or sugar that's added to things. Now, please take a look at that video. For those of you that have seen the video, if you want to give me a comment and tell me what you think of it, I would love that. It was a lot of thought that went into that video. And it's the 3rd in a series that I'm doing on nutrition and MS. I firmly believe that people that embrace a whole food or real food diet, they fare better, they have more energy, they can think more clearly, and symptoms sometimes seem to improve. But the biggest thing that I notice is with energy levels and with thinking and memory. So check that out if you haven't had a chance yet. Another video that I just put out this evening is a video that I actually made quite some time ago, several weeks or maybe even over a month ago. And it was a video that touched on a very, very sensitive topic. It took me a long time to figure out how to make the video. And I didn't launch it right away because I really had to give it a lot of thought. And this was a video talking about ways and complications of MS that can lead to someone with MS death. Now, I'm not trying to be gloomy and doomy. On the contrary, I want to sensitize you to the 3 things that can lead to death in MS because they're all treatable and preventable. And so if you haven't seen that video, please take a moment and check it out. I'm a little bit anxious because it's a very, very sensitive topic. And I certainly don't want people to think that I'm being crass or that I'm being gloomy or doomy. I really wanted to help raise awareness and education and sensitize you to key things that you want to fight against and avoid to prevent complications that can lead to death. So let me know what you think about that, guys. And if it makes sense to you or not, I would love to read your comments about it. So thanks for letting me share that kind of stuff. Let's answer a couple more questions. How often should you get an MRI of the spine, asks April Hurl. And why don't they get a brain and a spine MRI? So when we do MRIs, we typically order them by body part. So we can do brain, we can actually just do optic nerves, we can do cervical spine, we can do thoracic spine. And as part of the MS diagnosis, I feel it's most appropriate to get a brain, a cervical, and a thoracic spinal cord. To me, that's a comprehensive look at the central nervous system with imaging. Once the diagnosis is made, particularly when someone's on therapy, it's a best practice to get an MRI of the brain once a year. And the reason we get an MRI of the brain once a year is to look for things that we would miss otherwise. The brain is vast and it can easily rewire itself. And so you can have a new lesion and not know it. I saw a young lady today. She's doing fantastic clinically. She's having no problems. We got an MRI and she has several new lesions on her brain. And if we hadn't obtained the MRI, we wouldn't know there was a problem. And so the MRI was terribly helpful in that regard. It's not the recommendation of the Consortium of MS Centers, of which my center at Ohio Health is a member, to get a cervical spine every single time. The reason is, unlike the brain, it's almost impossible to have a lesion without knowing it. All the information from the supercomputer, the brain, gets funneled down into a spinal cord that's literally thinner than my 2 fingers here. And so a lesion in the spinal cord doesn't go unnoticed. And so it's not recommended that you get a standard MRI of the cervical spine every single year. It's recommended to do it only when you have new symptoms. Now, I think it is reasonable to get a spine MRI every couple years. So every 2 to 3 years, when we get a brain, we get a spine along with it. That's what we do at my center. That was a great question. Thank you. So Nay Rodriguez says, great video. I don't know if you're commenting on the diet video or if you're commenting on the video of causes of death, but thank you. And thank you for watching it. Cameron Sexton is online. Hey, Cameron, how you doing? I hope your family's doing well. He says, is it what I have transitioned to from Tysabri? You are more than welcome. All right. What else is going on here? So I've got someone, Karen, that writes in, just read a comment on your latest video that our lifespan is shortened by 7 to 14 years in comparison to the general population. So basically as a 52-year-old, and then she talks, so let's talk about that. Let's talk about life expectancy. There are some studies that suggested that people with MS have a shorter life expectancy than people without MS. And this comes at an era before highly effective therapies. We are, with our therapies, particularly by applying them really early and staying on them, we are making people live much, much longer. And we're making them live much longer without disability. We don't have an updated study that I'm aware of that looks at the most effective medicines and their effect on life expectancy. And it's my belief that if we apply highly effective medicines early on and we stay at it, and we pay attention to brain health, so to cardiovascular risk factors, avoiding smoking, staying physically active and fit, that you can live a normal life expectancy and, more importantly, a normal life quality. That is data that's out there, but I think it harkens back to an era when there was a lot of people that weren't on therapy or were on low efficacy therapy. And I really think that the playing field is different today. It is not my goal that my patients die early. It is not my goal that my patients become disabled. And we fight tooth and nail against that. And I think we're pretty effective. All right. Let's see what else we got here. So Letitia Johns writes in, today I experienced colorful zigzags in my right eye peripheral vision, had no pain or headache. I have relapsing MS. Is that a relapse? So Letitia, I can't answer your question for you. I would have to listen and better understand the full breadth of what's going on, and I would have to examine you. The way that you describe that doesn't sound like an optic neuritis. It sounds like a migraine or a migraine equivalent. And there's something called a migraine aura or visual aura. And that's kind of the description that I'm reading. But again, I don't have enough information to really know. Now, Dan McGee writes in, started the MyFitnessPal. Thanks. Well, Dan, that's awesome. Dan, thank you. In one of my recent videos, I shared a pro tip of using a program like MyFitnessPal, which is an app that you can download for free to be able to better understand the calories in and the calories out. And so if you are trying to get a better sense of your diet and the energy expenditure, one of the things that I think can be valuable is to start to learn about how many calories you put in your body and how many calories you're expending. That's not where dieting stops, but I think that's a great place for dieting to start. So Dan, thank you for doing that. That's really cool. Chuck O is online. Chuck, how are you doing tonight? Chuck is a moderator. Chuck, I really appreciate all of your help. He writes in, the images are usually what confirms it, talking about the spinal stenosis earlier. All right, let's look at some other questions. So Ronald writes in a really, really provocative question, and he says, how do you tell if you've transitioned from relapsing MS to secondary progressive MS? Are there really differences, or is all MS progressive and relapsing components? That is a brilliant question, Ronald, and thank you for asking it. And the answer is the second part. All MS is progressive, and all MS has relapsing inflammatory components. The best way that I can describe this is talking about Stephen Krieger's leaking pool model of MS. The leaking pool model of MS is something that I've talked about in several videos. Maybe the best place to check it out is a video I did on what is progression. And in this what is progression video, I explain the leaking pool in some detail, and I explain how I like to conceptually think of progression. The idea that you have relapsing MS and then there's a line in the sand and then you have progressive MS is an arcane idea, and we've moved past that. It's much more complex than that. Some people misunderstand. They think progressive MS is stage 4 and it's over with and there's nothing that can be done, and that's just simply not true at all. That's a most excellent question. If you haven't seen my video on what is progression, I would encourage you to check that out because I spend some time describing this at length. So Jamie Ferguson writes in and asks, is there any medications or tips for extreme fatigue? And the answer is yes. I have an entire playlist on my YouTube channel here that talks about tips and medicines to treat fatigue. So let's just go through 10 things that we can do to help with fatigue in no particular order. Number 1, you can take an MS medicine. Taking a disease-modifying therapy has been shown to improve fatigue big time. And so if you're not on a disease-modifying therapy, that's something you can do. Number 2, you can exercise as part of your lifestyle. Exercise improves energy levels, it consolidates sleep. It absolutely treats fatigue, no question about it. Number 3, you can avoid excessive use of drugs and alcohol. So alcohol, for example, is a sedative, and a lot of recreational drugs are somewhat sedating. And so if you're drinking a lot of alcohol or smoking a lot of pot, that might contribute to fatigue, and it's worthwhile just being aware of that. That's 3. Number 4 is to avoid polypharmacy. All too often, doctors are good at adding a drug, but we're not very good at taking a drug away. And so the average American MS patient is on 7 drugs, which is a lot. I recommend that every time you see your doctor, you say, is there anything on this list that we can remove? And if they add a drug, ask if there's one that can be removed. So that's 4. Number 5 is to make sure that you have good sleep quality and sleep quantity. If you're sleeping 4 or 5 hours a night, you're not going to be your best the next day, and you're going to have fatigue. If you're snoring and waking yourself up and having sleep apnea, or getting up to go to the bathroom all night long, or waking up with spasms and pain, you're not getting adequate restorative sleep. And so number 5 is to sleep. Number 6 is to consider your nutrition. And as I mentioned earlier, I just put out a video a couple days ago looking at eating whole foods and real foods. And anecdotally, it's my experience that when you cut out processed foods, you cut out fast food, and in particular, you cut out sugar, a lot of people have a lot more energy. Another one is to look at spasticity medicines, depression medicines, neuropathic pain medicines, which are and bladder medicines. All of these medicines can have side effects of fatigue. And so if you can't come off the medicine, maybe you can decrease the dose that you're on. We've got 3 more to go through. So let's do medicines. So there's one medicine that can be very, very helpful to treat fatigue. It's a prescription medicine, and it's called Provigil. There's a cousin of it called Nuvigil. And those 2 medicines can trick the brain into being more awake. I have a lot of patients that are able to continue to work, or able to continue to go to school, or able to continue living their life and running their household only because of the value of Provigil or Nuvigil. I'll throw out another medicine. It's another prescription medicine, and that's Adderall or Ritalin or Vyvanse. These are all stimulant medications. You may have heard of them in the context of children that have ADHD or ADD. It turns out that they help immensely with people with MS, with fatigue and with energy levels, and also with concentration. Lastly, I'll share an amino acid, levocarnitine. This is over the counter, and I'm not giving you a medical recommendation. I'm just teaching you about stuff. Levocarnitine, taken twice a day, has been shown in MS studies to help with energy. So there are 10 things that can be done to help with energy. If you want to hear a bunch more, check out my playlist on fatigue, because I have a lot of videos where I really delve into this pretty deeply. So Tracy Scott writes in, is there a correlation between MS and IgG and MS and seizures, depending on where the lesions are? So yes, people with MS are more likely to have seizures than people without MS. Now, that doesn't mean that all people with MS are going to have seizures, because you're not, but you're more likely to, and it has to do with where the lesions are. There are cortical lesions. Cortex is Greek for bark, and it's the surface of the brain, the covering of the brain. That's the gray matter, and that's where we do our thinking and processing. And there are MS lesions in gray matter. This happens. And gray matter lesions can increase the risk of developing seizures. And so there's one study that suggests that people with MS are 6 times more likely to develop seizures compared to those that don't. Excellent question. Let's take another one. So Catherine Venturini, sorry if I said the name wrong, Catherine, writes in, hi, Dr. B from Boston. Well, hello from Boston. What do you think about predicting progression in PPMS? Can we categorize patients as mild, moderate, severe? What are the indicators? I think that there's a lot of different ways to think about this. One way is to use the neurological scales that we have. So the most commonly used scale is the EDSS, or the Expanded Disability Status Scale. And that's when the neurologist does an exam and then rates this degree of severity 0 through 10. 0 is I have nothing neurologically wrong with me, and 10 is dead from MS. 6 is using a cane. 6.5 is using a walker. 7, you're using a walker not very well. 8, 8.5, you're in a wheelchair. 9, you're in bed. And so there's a scale. And so one way to do it is to look at the scale. That's not my favorite way. There's other scales that we use that look at something called the Multiple Sclerosis Functional Composite, or the MSFC. And the MSFC is broken down by systems. So we look at cognition, we look at upper extremity function, we look at ambulation, and we derive numbers. And so those numbers can be tracked and changed over time. Another way to look at it is to look at function and what the human being is able to do. Not just how far you can walk, but activities of daily living. How are you doing driving your car, brushing your teeth, eating, preparing food, managing the checkbook? And so there are some very, very functional ways of doing it. But those are the most common ways. You know, I'm very interested in function. I'm not as interested in some old neurological scale as I am in what it is that you can do. But I think that all of them bring something to the table. We don't have like stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. like you might hear in cancer. That doesn't exist. Great question. All right. So what else do we see here? I think I've caught up. So, while there's more questions coming in, let me bring up another topic. And I asked you guys about this earlier, but I'm still having a lot of trepidation thinking about it. And so I want to bring it up to you again. I recently clicked a button and I monetized my channel. And I have a lot of really weird mixed feelings about that. And I thought I would talk to you about it tonight a little bit. So as you're very well aware, there's an option if your YouTube channel grows big enough where you can monetize, and that involves ads. And I wasn't really sure about it. I clicked the button and now I'm regretting it a little bit. And I'm wondering if I should remove it. I posed a question in the community channel, and earlier today there was about 370 some people that had responded. So if you responded, thank you very much. And I asked, should I A, turn off the monetization and just do away with it? Or B, should I allow the monetization to go on and then use all the money to send team members of mine to educational sessions? So I would be able to use the money to help pay for a nurse practitioner or a social worker or a nurse or a medical assistant or a therapist, physical therapist, occupational therapist to one of the MS conferences. Now, thus far, there's been about just under 400 responses, and 85% of people said, go ahead and monetize, and 15% of people said, don't. I want to add some more information. I've only had my channel monetized for like a week, and I want you guys to understand it's not a very large amount of money. I don't have a gigantic channel. I don't have millions of views. If I have a video that has 2,000 to 5,000 views, I'm really excited about that. And what that translates into a couple dollars. So it's not a lot of money, it's a little bit of money. And so I just bring that up to you guys because maybe that's not worth it. I really am doing this to help educate. I'm not doing it because I'm trying to make some money on YouTube. But I do like the idea of being able to help fund, even if it only helps a little bit, to help educate my team. So please write in the comments and just be very candid with me. Say, Erin, that's dumb. You shouldn't do that. Or I hate it. Or if you do that, I'm not going to watch it. Or if you feel differently, tell me about it. Because I'm really kind of torn up inside. I'm not exactly sure what to do. And so I'm really reaching out to you so that you can help educate me on what you think. And I'll look forward to reading all the comments down in the post. All right, let's see what else we got here. So Michael Dial writes in, how do you determine if a patient has aggressive MS? Now, aggressive MS is one of my big areas of interest in MS. And if I have an area clinically that is my focus, it's on taking care of aggressive multiple sclerosis. There's a couple ways that we try to figure out if we think someone has an aggressive disease course. Certain prognostic factors predispose someone to be more aggressive than not. Now, that doesn't mean that if you have these factors, it's going to be more aggressive. Excuse me, I just mean that statistically you're more likely. So being a boy, diagnosed after the age of 40, spinal cord disease, motor presentation, meaning motor deficits early on, cerebellar or coordination deficits early on, sphincter involvement, so bowel and bladder early on, incomplete recovery from attack, frequent attacks with a short duration in between, achieving an EDSS of 2.5 after the first 2 years. And I can go on and list a couple other factors, but these are all prognostic factors that would predispose someone to be more aggressive than not. There's also factors on the MRI, things like a high number of T2 lesions or a high number of dark T1 lesions, or frequent or consistent enhancement or accelerated brain shrinkage. So if you meet someone with MS that has these factors, they are more likely to have an aggressive disease course than not. And that actually influences the medicines that we choose. We may be more aggressive earlier in our application of highly effective therapies, trying to help them out. Now, maybe the best way is to look what happens on treatment. And so I view someone as having aggressive MS if they're having breakthrough disease despite being on a medicine, particularly if they're having lots of attacks despite being on a medicine. And I also look at their recovery from attacks. So if they need lots of steroids, or if they need hospitalization, or if they're not bouncing back, those are aggressive features. If they're accruing disability at a fast pace, And so maybe, you know, within the first couple years, they're really not able to do their normal activities. It's impacting their quality of life and their ability to walk, for example. These are all things that suggest aggressive. And so you can also look at the change on MRI over time. These things would help define someone as aggressive. And when we see aggressive, what do we want to do? We want to get a big hammer and smack it. We want to get a SWAT team to attack it. We want to use the most effective medicine as early as possible and for as long as possible to kind of crush the disease and get it under control. Thanks for asking the question about aggressive medicine. All right, let's look for some more questions. Charity Davis writes in and says, keep it monetized. It will only help to grow the channel and reach more people. That's a really good point, Charity. I didn't think about the fact that YouTube, the search engine YouTube, might push the videos out farther if I monetize it. I should do some research and look into that. Thanks for bringing that up. So Julie writes in, oh, she's talking to someone else on the line. I won't read that question. Ahmed writes in, it takes me longer to process and summarize information. For example, essay writing. It takes me an hour at times to write a review. Do you think it might be something wrong with my brain? Thanks. So I'm going to assume that we're talking about someone who has MS, and I'm going to assume that they're noticing that they're having more problems in processing. And that is absolutely something that you can see in multiple sclerosis. Sometimes I refer to that as cog fog or cognitive impairment. And I have several videos where I talk about cog fog and cognitive impairment on my channel. There are things that can be done about that. Some of the stimulant medications can help with that, believe it or not, because they allow you to attend. You can be planful about when you try to read and study. And so you may find that you have more cognitive energy first thing in the day or right after a nap. That can help. You may find that when you're overheated, you don't think as clearly. And so you can make sure that you cool your body. There are even medicines like Ampera that can help with that. So this is a real thing, and it's something that we want to work to improve. Working with a speech pathologist at cognitive rehab can help with that. So there's a lot of things that we can do. So Michael Walden writes in, hi, Dr. Boster. Well, hello, Michael. Can an MS flare with no new lesions trigger dementia? And I think the answer is no. I don't think that an MS flare can trigger dementia. When I see cognitive impairment in an MS, it's not usually from one attack. Now, there are rare instances for everything. And I have a video on my channel called Rare and Unusual Symptoms that I've seen in clinic. And in that video, I talk about someone that was actually psychotic. That's not dementia. They lost touch with reality because of a big, scary lesion in the front of their brain. Dementia, if we pick apart that word, mentia means thinking, and duh means you don't do it as well as you used to. So dementia means you don't think as well as you used to. And you can have a loss of cognitive function and some dementia over the course of MS. But I generally don't see that as one big attack and then suddenly you're demented. It doesn't really work like that. This is more commonly associated with the slow, steady decline in brain volume, which can be accelerated in MS. And it's the accumulation of many, many lesions over time that can lead to this problem. Thank you for asking the question. All right, what else do we have? So Michael Murphy writes, I just had a second opinion on my MS at the Cleveland Clinic. Ever spinal tap in the spine is clear, but they tell me that I have relapsing MS. So again, Michael, I don't have enough information. You know, I have a lot of friends that work at the Cleveland Clinic. Rob Bermel's a buddy of mine. There's some great MS doctors up there. And I think that that's a solid place to go. You know, seeking out a second opinion, let me say a few words about that. It really should be in a center of excellence. You want to make sure that the second opinion you're getting is from an MS specialist. We at our center at Ohio Health do quite a few second opinions or third opinions or fourth opinions. And we want to be able to help. I should be able to prove or disprove that someone has MS by doing a workup. I have videos that talk about how you make the diagnosis and, you know, taking a careful clinical history, listening carefully, doing a proper neurological examination, doing a proper protocol MRIs, sometimes doing a spinal tap, and sometimes there are other tests that we do. And so if you have doubts about your diagnosis, or even if you just want a second opinion about management, it's not wrong to seek out a second opinion. Now, it might be silly if you're getting like your 10th opinion, But seeking out a second opinion is not a horrible thing because, you know, it's your body, it's your brain, it's your spinal cord. And if you have questions, I think it's reasonable. You don't need a second opinion. If you have a strong relationship with your neurologist and you trust your neurologist and you guys can communicate, I don't want to give the impression that everyone needs to go out and seek out a second opinion, because that's certainly not the case. So Mary Lou Clemens writes, Dr. B, no coffee for you today? And so she's noticing I have my carbonated water drink that I love very much. Well, here in Columbus, Ohio, what time is it? It's almost 10 o'clock at night. And I don't do a lot of sleeping. I'm not a great sleeper, as my grandma used to say. If I have coffee this late, there is no earthly way that I can stay up. I typically will drink coffee right when I wake up. So, you know, maybe around, I don't know, 5, 6, somewhere in there. And I'll have a few cups before I go into work. And then I will love having a cup of coffee with each of my patients in the morning. And I'll have a cup of coffee with almost every other patient in the afternoon, which turns out to be quite a bit of coffee. But I really put the brakes on it by the time I leave work, and sometimes even an hour or two before that. When I get home, it's not coffee time. It's typically water time, unless I'm going to have some grog. If I drink coffee this late, game over. I would be up doing a live stream with you at 3 in the morning because there's no way I could sleep. Every once in a while, I won't understand why I'm having trouble falling asleep. I may even wake my wife up and say, oh my God, I can't fall asleep. And she'll ask a very intelligent question. She'll say, did you have any coffee with dinner? and almost invariably, I was so excited at dinner that I had a sip of coffee and oops, then I don't sleep so hot. So no coffee, but I promise you I've had quite a bit of coffee today. I had a big clinic today. We saw a lot of patients and there was a lot of coffee. All right, what else do we have? So Kathy Collins writes in Pinewood, the Dempsey Center at Riverside helps keep us put together with related activities. Google the Dempsey Center. So Kathy, thanks for the shout out. I work at Ohio Health in my clinic. The MS Center where I work is in the building Riverside Hospital. And in the first floor of Riverside Hospital is this amazing resource center called the Dempsey Center. The Dempsey Center was created by a huge donation by the Dempsey family. It's got amazing social workers and nurses that work there. It's a resource center. The MS group, my group, does educational classes there once a month. We do educational classes in the evening. They're free. They're for anyone that lives in Central Ohio. You don't have to be one of our patients. And we typically have, 20-some people that'll come out for a given lecture. The Dempsey Center is really cool. They're a great group of people. They do a great job of helping educate and bring people together. They also help patients and families navigate the computer. And so we have an electronic medical record at Ohio Health, like a lot of people do. And it can be daunting to use MyChart and to log on to the patient portal. And so the folks at the Dempsey Center do so many wonderful things, including that. So thanks for the shout out there. There are 74 thumbs up. That makes me feel great. If you're liking this video, please consider giving it a thumbs up. There's 93 people online. That's a wonderful, beautiful thing on a Wednesday evening. You guys remember I'm online live streaming with you right now because it's MS Awareness Month, and I'm committed to jumping online as much as I can to bring you MS education, to educate you, to empower you, and to hopefully energize people with MS. So if you're feeling the love, throw a thumbs up. Just click that button down below. So Michael Murphy says, should I get a third opinion or could I send my files to you? So Michael, I don't have a mechanism where I can really review your files in a meaningful fashion. I would love to develop that technology where I work, where we could receive and do a virtual consult. We do a lot of real consults. And people bring us their records, we go through them all. They bring us their MRIs, we go through them all. And then we take a very careful history. We'll spend about an hour and a half with you in the clinic room. That's just with the doctor, where we pick apart the history, we try to understand it, we do a really thorough neuro examination. And then after that, we bring in the cavalry. We'll have the physical and occupational therapist see you, we'll have our social workers see you, we'll have speech pathology see you, we'll have registered dietitians see you if need be. And we really try to understand and pick it apart. And so I don't have a mechanism where you can just mail me your files and I look at it and mail it back. Maybe that's something that we're going to be able to do in the future, but right now it's kind of old school, face-to-face, real deal medicine. It's good stuff. All right. Let's take a look here. I've been on for about 50 minutes. It's getting a bit late. I'm going to take 1 or 2 more questions and we're going to wrap it up tonight, guys. I appreciate all of you for jumping online. There's 87 thumbs up. Let's see if we can get to 100 before we jump offline. That would be really, really cool. So let's see. I've got someone from Australia. That's amazing. That's on my bucket list. I would love to go to Australia. I covet. My wife and I watch a lot of videos, documentaries looking at Australia. That is really cool. All right, what do I got here? Dr. B, bedtime for me. Catch you next time. Vicky, have a good night. Let's wrap up, guys. My name is Erin Boster, and thank you for learning about MS with me. It's MS Awareness Month. And I think that as we reflect about what we've done this evening and what we're doing this month, it's all about community. It's all about the village. It's my goal to grow your village. I want to be one of your village members. And as you look at this growing online community, we are all Global Village members. I think that we as villagers in this growing MS village, we have an obligation. I really do. I think that we have a commitment to help other people understand what it means to have MS and what it means to thrive and strive and be the most awesome version of you despite having MS. And so, as we go through this month and as you interact with people, it's my hope that you can help them better understand. So much of MS is invisible. So many of the symptoms are invisible. And I think that if we don't take the ownership to help educate others about what MS is and what it can do and how it impacts the lives of loved ones, then we're really going to put ourselves in a bad position. And so that might be a challenge to you. Today is Wednesday. Tomorrow, when you go out into the brave world, try to think about one way that you can raise the level of awareness. Think about one way that you can impact someone and leave them with a better understanding. I'm going to wrap up tonight. Thank you so much. I'm really looking forward to reading through all the comments I didn't get to. Thank you for letting me talk about the channel and my strife and challenges and deciding whether or not to leave on to monetization. And thank you for, and I have a guest come here. River Bear, come here. Guys, before I jump offline, I want to introduce you to my youngest child. And this is my little one right here. This is River Bear. Hi, baby doggy. That's a very pretty girl. So River wanted to say goodnight to you as well. Until my next live stream or until my next video, this is Erin Boster saying, take care.